Get started here on our Bible class together today. So we had a leftover question from last week as we were meeting. I got to talk to them Wednesday. It's okay, they're not here this morning. But I was asked if we knew the origin of the common table prayer. Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest. Let thy gifts to us be blessed. So I asked around, and we have an origin story of it dating back to 1671 in Germany, to a children's catechism at the time. We don't know if that's the original source of it, but it at least goes back that far. So that prayer that we say as we get together to eat, 350 years old, at least, if not more. And so, of course, when I told the family about that, they said, what about now I lay me down to sleep? So I did. I looked that one up. Hang on, I got that on my phone. I didn't get that done in time to write it down. But that one comes from 1737, the New England Primer. So, Come Lord Jesus is a German prayer, but Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep is an English prayer. So different origins in that way. Both of them multiple centuries old, though. So now, as soon as I hear that, I wonder if they'll have another one they want. But anyway, track those two down. So in case you're curious on those. So our class together, starting out today, is again the last of our series on the idea of being a member of the LCMS, a member at St. Matthew. We went through the liturgy, Divine Service Setting 3 together. Why do we worship the way we do? All these things. That's today. Our next major Bible class is going to be the book of Romans, Paul's letter to the church in Rome. I'm going to wait a few weeks to start that one. We'll do some side tangent topics. So if you have something kind of a one-off conversation you'd like to hear, let me know. I've got at least 3 in my pocket that I want to do before we start a long class again. One is going to be the thing I wanted to do for Higher Things this summer, which their topic for the Higher Things gathering for our youth is the dying church. And so I wanted to do a presentation on the gates of hell from the Bible passage as Jesus is speaking to the disciples. And Pastor Goodman reached back out to me and said, it's a wonderful topic, but it's actually the plenary, so you can't take it. So I'm going to do something on that for one of our weeks. And so I punted. I'll do, with the kids this summer, my breakout presentation will end up being on the armor of God from Ephesians 6. So I want to do that class with you all too. And then we had talked a while back about the possibility of doing just a translation study one Sunday and looking at the different English translations and seeing how they compare, maybe translate an Old Testament chapter and a New Testament chapter and just walk through and see what translations do, which translations might be helpful, and so forth. So that's one that I would like to do as well. But we'll get to Romans here this spring, and that'll certainly last us through summer and probably into fall as well. So our conversation this morning, being a member, looking at the LCMS first. So the LCMS is, we don't always use the phrase Protestant, but you see the word protest in that, and that's a Reformation term. It's been kind of tweaked and changed and used in different ways since, but the protest against the teachings of the church of Rome at the time. We are the 8th largest denomination in the U.S., 2nd largest among Lutheran church bodies, the largest being the ELCA. I don't know if we'll be smaller than them for all that much longer. They've been shrinking much faster than the LCMS has been shrinking in recent years. Almost every American denomination has shrunk in recent years just because the United States, if you go back to even just the year 2000, census data was 83% of the country claimed Christianity as their religion, and then you go 20 years forward, just 62%. That's a 21% drop. So those numbers hit all the churches across the board, with the exception, perhaps, I think of like the Quakers and Islam, but they're not a Christian group, so that's why I wasn't including them in that. Kevin?
Do you know what the attendance rates are compared before and after COVID?
Attendance rates before and after COVID. For the LCMS, those numbers are down. I don't know across the board for other churches. I would assume similar. The LCMS across the board, generally speaking, is down about 25%. St. Matthew is up as are some other congregations. So it's not all churches, but certainly the majority of them. A lot of them hit hard 6 years ago. It's been 6 years now. So the origin of the LCMS. The LCMS has existed for, well, almost 200 years. 1847, there was a group of 14 Lutheran congregations in the United States that gathered together. They met in the city of Chicago, and they hosted a little conference together, and they decided to join together as a church body. And so the original name is up there for you in English, because I don't remember it in German specifically, but the German Evangelical Lutheran Synod of Missouri, Ohio, and other states. Because Missouri had the most congregations of the 14, Ohio the next, and then there were other states still included in that gathering, so they did the other, rather than making the name even longer. And as you see at the bottom of that slide up there, the name shortened at the 100th anniversary celebration. So 100th anniversary, they renamed the church, shorthanded it to Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. So I've got two names up there for you. How many of you have heard of Martin Stephan before? So the origin of the LCMS coming to the United States out of Germany in the early, right around 1800, was states' rights kind of an issue almost. It was a government authority issue that the government was saying, you have to worship God in this way. And the Lutherans said, well, that's not faithful. We can't do that. And so there were 5 ships worth of Lutherans who came over from Germany to the United States at that point. 4 of the 5 boats made it. One of them did not. We don't know if it was lost at sea or if those people ended up maybe landing elsewhere and off course and start a new community wherever they ended up. But we don't have that information. We just know 4 made it. So you can imagine entire congregations selling off their possessions, just bringing the money across the ocean to start new here in the United States. They came at Gulf of Mexico, New Orleans, came up the Mississippi River, landed in St. Louis. So Martin Stephan was elected bishop. He was one of the pastors. He was elected to serve as the bishop, so the head of the church, when they landed, he was elected on the boats as they were coming over by the people. So when they got to the States, Stephan had 2 offers for land for them to build a community in. And the offers, one was in what we call Perry County, Missouri, which is the offer he accepted. The other is in the St. Louis area. It's in the area of St. Louis called Merrimack, if you're familiar at all with that area. The Merrimack River over there, it's part of along there. So he chose the more rural location of the 2 because he was afraid that city life would corrupt the population of the church. So they left the women and children in St. Louis with the older men who could not physically build homes. They took the rest of the men down to Perry County, and they spent some time clearing land, building homes, and so forth before bringing their families all together down there. So that's the origin. Martin Stephan was eventually removed as the head of the church for 2 accusations, which historically I still don't know if they have any validity to them or not. He was accused of inappropriate relations with women in the church. He was also accused of embezzling the money of the church. And so they put him on a boat. They sent him over the Mississippi River to Illinois. He started a congregation there. To this day, the people of Red Bed, Illinois, have a very high opinion of Pastor Stephan. The people on the other side of the river, not so much. So I don't know. The Lord will sort such things out, but it did create lasting things. So in the LCMS to this day, pastors typically don't have anything to do with the money in the congregation. Bishop Stephan is why, 200 years ago. So you see these things and you can see connections in that way. So the challenge as they removed the leader of the church, the challenge that they struggled with immediately was, are we still a church? Our pastors abandoned their calls to their churches in Germany. We don't have a congregation here. So they were wrestling with all these ideas. It was C.F.W. Walther, one of the pastors, who was able to help them see through the scriptures that they are a church. They are okay in being in the United States. They were debating if they should just get on ships and head back to Germany at that point. So they stay. C.F.W. Walther becomes the first president of this new synod. He would also be the first president of Concordia Seminary in St. Louis and serve in those roles. The primary way the LCMS grew in its early years was caring for German immigrants. As a German-speaking church, German immigrants came to the community. They would build schools first, and then attached to the school, they would plant a church. So that's why the LCMS to this day has the second most schools of any church body in the United States, because that's how we started. A lot of our schools go very far back when you look at their histories. So in 1897, the church body had grown from those 14 congregations to 685,000 people in 50 years. And then they grew, I think we hit 3 million at one point, maybe in the 1970s, as kind of the peak range. We switched from German speaking to English back with World War I. Anybody know why we might have done that? Who was the enemy in World War I, right? Germany was one of the enemies, and so we wanted people to know that we were not the enemy. And the same thing with the language, the same thing with the state flag or the national flag. Those are changes that the church made because of the world wars to appeal to the community around them. Yeah, Judy.
But not all of them changed.
Correct.
My dad confirmed.
Yeah, some churches continue to use German. There's a church in St. Louis, the one I grew up at, that still has a German church service once a year. But I mean, it's a lot less than weekly, but once a year, Christmas Eve, they still have a service in German for those who want to attend. Okay. So, and if you look around in congregations in the LCMS, you will still see many, many German people. How many of you in here are German? So not everybody, right, but a good number of the congregation. It's just part of our history. It's part of our origin. So we thank the Lord for caring for his church. All right, so membership peaked in 1970 at 2.8 million. It was down so it crashed around the pandemic. It was at 1.7 just after the pandemic, and today it's at 1.65 or something like that in the LCMS. I checked just this morning, these stats are new, 5,743 LCMS congregations, 1,697 schools, and the LCMS website didn't differentiate between different types of church workers. It just has 20,650 rostered workers in the church. So last I heard, about 9,000 pastors, but that number may have shrunk a little bit since I've heard that number last. Our headquarters is still over in St. Louis, and the current president of the LCMS is Reverend Matthew Harrison. How many of you have met Pastor Harrison at some point? Okay, I expected a couple more, but all right. He has been the LCMS president since 2010. Pastor Frith, does that sound right? Yeah, and I heard him say recently he's willing to serve one more term. If he's elected this summer, he'll serve once again for 3 years, and after that he would retire. So we'll see how the Synod convention elections and things go this summer, but he's willing to keep in that role for a few more years.
Didn't he rip Congress a new one back in 2012?
He did stand before Congress. Well, I guess he sat. They didn't make him stand. He sat at a table, and so he addressed the nation. He addressed Congress. I wouldn't have got the 2012 year, but yeah, he did have an opportunity to do that and stand for what we believe as the church. We are arranged into 35 districts, so I thought I'd give you a map that at least helps you visualize it a little bit based on the country. Most of our districts are geographic, and so you can see the blue is the central region here in the middle. Missouri is a district all to itself. My clicker just died again. All right, that's okay. So we are in the Missouri district, for example. There are 5 regions. Each region has a vice president. Those positions are up for election this summer. Our congregation had the opportunity to nominate a regional vice president for Central Region, of which we're a part. So we nominated, I think, Peter Lang, who was overwhelmingly nominated for that role, so probably will be elected. So 33 districts are geographic. Some of the states, it's just based on congregational numbers. So as you look at up top, Minnesota's divided in half. There's a Minnesota North, there's a Minnesota South. My first call was to Minnesota South. I served there for 4 years, so I know a little bit more of their story. They used to be one bigger district, and at one point decided we're going to divide into 2 districts to make this a little easier. When they did that, they agreed that every 3 years they would still have a joint conference together, so all their pastors would meet, and they would do that up at, I think it was called Madden's, at a lake up in northern Minnesota every 3 years. I only got to attend one of those, but got to see some people from Minnesota North as well. You can look at Illinois, and Illinois is divided into 3 districts. There's a southern Illinois district, a central, and a northern. Northern is almost entirely the city of Chicago. It's more than that, but primarily. Central takes up most of the state, and then southern Illinois has the section just east of St. Louis, really, as its region. So those are the 33 geographics. Other spots that are combined across states because there just aren't that many of our churches. So California, Nevada, Hawaii is a district, all those 3 states together. 2 of our districts are not geographic. Anybody know the names of our 2 non-geographical districts? English district? That's okay. The other one has no meaning to its acronym. It is the SELC district. If you ask them, there is no meaning to those 4 letters. There used to be, but they got rid of the meaning. I don't know why. I don't know that story. So English district was simply from the German-speaking days of the Synod. There were new churches forming in communities around the country, and America was an English-speaking country, so these new congregations that were not necessarily German in their origin started having English services. They would have pastors who could speak English, and after a little while, their pastors were really not that good at German anymore, and so they started saying, well, we're not going to send our pastors off to German-speaking conferences where they won't get anything anyway. We'll hold our own conferences where they can at least gather together, learn, get to know each other. And so they started their own district for that purpose. They still exist to this day, even though the rest of us are all speaking English in our churches now. They just haven't dissolved in that way and gone back in. We have one English district from Lincoln, Nebraska, all the way to St. Louis, and all that stretch, there's one English district church, and it happens to be 5 minutes from here. Beautiful Savior Lutheran Church here in Lee's Summit. Pastor Gruen over there is their circuit visitor, so he has a very wide circuit to seek to care for. I don't know how many congregations are in his circuit. So districts are divided into circuits, by the way. Circuits are usually anywhere from like 7 to 10 congregations typically, and that's just, again, local, meant for caring for the congregations from above. So you'll have the district helping in that way, but you'll also have what's called a circuit visitor. That name has changed from time to time. It's been circuit visitor, then circuit counselor. It's back to circuit visitor, who helps work with those congregations when they're in conflict or if they're in need of calling a pastor, those kinds of situations. The other one is the SELC district, as I mentioned. They really exist for the same reason the English district does. Their pastors were speaking Slovak. It was the Slovak Evangelical Lutheran Church as a district of the LCMS. But again, that's no longer the case. They don't have Slovakian-speaking pastors today. They just stripped the acronym of its meaning. I've even heard their district president say that, so I can say it with confidence. It means nothing. So, anyway. Let's see, do I have anything else on that? We have different partnerships in different forms, different levels of governance. So there's auxiliaries. We have 2 auxiliary organizations. There's the Lutheran Hour Ministries, which used to be Lutheran Laymen's League. Some of you would have connection with that as well. And then there's the Lutheran Women's Missionary League, which you know better as LWML. We have both of those groups working here at our congregation at St. Matthew. Then we have corporate entities, so we have 5. There's Concordia Historical Institute, which serves as our archive and houses the history of the church. And when congregations close, what do you do with the records of that congregation? They all get shipped off to CHI, which is, if you want to know where it is, Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. It's on their campus over in St. Louis, Forest Park area. The LCMS Foundation is another one. Lutheran Church Extension Fund, LCEF, is one that many of you are probably familiar with. You can have investor accounts with them. For children under age 18, you can get an account that offers 3% interest, which isn't too shabby. with $25 a year free for community service hours and $25 a year free for good grades at school, on top of that 3%. Lutheran Federal Credit Union, so I should say LCF also does loans for churches to build and loans for church workers to buy homes when they first get to a community to serve in that place. So that's how they use the money in the other direction. We started our own credit union, I don't know, probably 7-8 years ago, something like that. I've never functioned with the credit union, so I can't really tell you much about them. We have a trust entity that provides the benefit packages to our church workers called Concordia Plans. They operate out of St. Louis as well. The LCMS website says that there are roughly 300 recognized service organizations, but when you actually check the directory, there's only 197 in the directory, so I went with 197 for the slide for that purpose, but these are groups that serve in different missions, education, or social service aspects. Pastor Frith, is the Lutheran Center for Religious Liberty an RSO?
It's not.
It's its own thing?
It's like an agency of sin.
Okay. It didn't make any of these lists as I was on the Synod website this morning, so.
I see you spinning off is that the LCMS takes care of our accounting and the processing of our donations.
So the relationship's there, but.
It's there. It's like, I think he'd like to push us to be a RSO.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right. We have 2 seminaries, one in St. Louis, Missouri, one in Fort Wayne. Both of those seminaries have quite a storied history to them. You can still, if you go to St. Louis, see the one-room log cabin seminary. It's on their campus, back from the days of CFW Walther. Fort Wayne has a much more, so St. Louis's campus is very castle-like, the architecture, kind of neat. Fort Wayne is much more spread out, a lot more green space in their community. They've got a lake there as well. And we have 6 Concordia universities still in our system, called the Concordia University System. So Chicago, Irvine, California, Seward, Nebraska, St. Paul, Minnesota. It would be Mequon, Wisconsin, and then Ann Arbor, Michigan as the 6. Just a little bit about that structure. So how many of you went to one of those schools? All right, 6 or 7. Hannah and I both graduated from Concordia, Nebraska. I've been on all of those campuses. Well, I've not been to Ann Arbor and I've not been to Irvine. Been on the others. I mentioned at the end of church I would bring up our partnerships around the world, so I'm just going to give you a list of all these churches that we are in partnership, altar and pulpit fellowship with around the world. So we have in Africa, 10 churches that we are in partnership with in Ghana, Kenya, Liberia, Nigeria, a couple in South Africa, Togo, Sudan, and Uganda. All those countries where there's a Lutheran church that we are in fellowship with. I put italics on the last 3 because we looked at these partnerships together in 2017 when I first showed up. We did this. That's where most of the information's from. I tried to update the stats this week, but the ones that are in italics are new relationships, new fellowships that we've had since that class in 2017. So in the last decade, we have 3 new church bodies that we're in fellowship with in Africa than before. In Asia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Korea, Papua New Guinea, Philippines, and then the Kalen Evangelical Lutheran Church is in Sri Lanka. I'm not sure if it's the same as the Lanka Lutheran Church that got crossed off at the bottom. We're no longer in partnership with the Japan Lutheran Church either. So we may have lost 1 and 1 rebranded, or we lost 2 and we got a new one. I'm not entirely sure. I couldn't find the history as I was looking that up.
What happened with the Japan Lutheran Church?
I don't know. It was just a small group, 35 congregations, 2,500 people. I don't know the story there. Anybody know the story of what happened to our fellowship with the church in Japan? Rebecca? Okay. So they went the route of women's ordination, so we broke that fellowship. Okay. I know that's been a struggle elsewhere too. Okay. Kat? Yeah, sorry. The first number is the number of members in the church. The second is their congregations, and the third is their pastors. So the China Evangelical Lutheran Church of Taiwan has 2,000 members, 20 congregations served by 26 pastors. Thanks for pointing that out, sorry. Over in Eurasia, we have several partnerships there: Belgium, Denmark, England, France, Germany, Kazakhstan, India, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, Portugal, Russia, 2 in Russia, Ukraine, and then Finland. The church that's in Finland is one that is new, so there's 2 new partnerships there in the bottom. The one in Finland you may have heard about over the last decade plus. There's been a court trial against 2 of the members of that church body. The one is actually a former government legislator. I think her name's pronounced Pavi Razanen, and then Bishop Juhana Pojola. The bishop published her writings, which is why he got pressed charges against. All she did at first was post something to social media in her country about how marriage is between a man and a woman, and that started the whole fiasco. To have a government official say something like that. So that court case has dragged on all this time against those 2, and they've been able to stand trial and proclaim Christ to others and so forth. I did an interview for the podcast with a pastor in Finland, and you can learn a little bit more about their case. He said there was new news coming, but I haven't heard the new news. Have you heard the new news? Okay. I thought I'd ask. But he said there would be some new ones. So you can check out that episode if you'd like on the website. Yeah.
That Latvian church, aren't they the only state church that's still pretty much confessional?
I don't know. Could be. And they didn't have a number to report. They had 289 churches, but they didn't say how many people there are in those churches. Karen? So those who couldn't hear Karen, she said when her daughter was serving in the Ukraine, she went to a church service there at one of these churches, and it was in German, and it was all translated for the people into Russian, and then it was translated for Karen into English. So,
Speaking of Russia, is it a type of underground church, or is it publicly open?
I think for the most part, the ones in Russia today are more open. Some of these certainly are underground, but I don't think the Russian ones are. So China's up there. China, we've got a partner church in China, right there at the top. But yeah, it is of Taiwan. It starts with the word China. And Hong Kong as well. Yeah, I couldn't speak to persecution levels for these churches. Like, for example, on the African slide about South Sudan and Sudan in general. Sudan's been heavily hit by persecution over the last 50 years, if not more. In Latin America, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Guatemala, Haiti, Mexico, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Venezuela. And then in North America, Canada, the Lutheran Church Canada, and in the United States, the American Association of Lutheran Churches. 57 congregations, 10,000 members, a small church body that we are in fellowship with. I think Jordan Cooper is an online pastor that you may have heard about, or Chris Roseborough. Those are 2 of their pastors, of their 108 pastors, and they do a lot of social media work. Jordan Cooper does a lot of podcasts and things. Pastor Roseborough does a lot of trying to debunk false teaching that's all over the church. If you ever are interested, he's got a game called Prophecy Bingo, where he'll give you a bingo card with common false prophet words that they like to use, and then he just gives you a video to watch a false prophet preach, and you can try to play bingo with their words and see how it goes. That's one of his more popular shows. And then LCMS membership there at 1.67 million. So in total, our partnerships around the world were at 2.8 million. That's down from 10 years ago, 500,000, but that's because the LCMS here is down 700,000. So in the world, globally, our partnerships are up 200,000 of our brothers and sisters in Christ. So those are just synodical things. This was the quote that I found that made me want to look some of that up this week, was Pastor Harrison saying, as of today, this is 2017, you can't read that purple text. I can't even read that purple text. As of today, we have 20 Lutheran church bodies around the world seeking church fellowship with the LCMS. It appears there will be many more. They are not coming to us for money. They want solid biblical and Lutheran theology. Our challenges domestically are enormous. Our opportunities internationally are equally enormous. I sincerely ask for your prayers. The strength needed is beyond the ability of any of us or all of us. Lord, have mercy. So I thought it was neat to show that 6 of those 20 church bodies are now in fellowship with us at this point today. So thanks be to God for that. All right, St. Matthew as a congregation. The hierarchy, the way that the church body works in the LCMS is not like you'd think of in other church bodies. For example, Rome, a lot of people know it's top down, right? It goes from the Pope and the people in the congregation are at the bottom. The LCMS has flipped that over. The people at the congregation are at the top in terms of authority. Certainly the Lord has the chief authority in the church, but our voters' assembly is the one that makes the decisions here at St. Matthew. If you need a new pastor, the voters call the pastor. If you've got a vote on buying land or getting rid of land or building a new building or whatever it is, that's your choice as the congregation. You all do those things. So that you don't have to meet all the time, you appoint a board of directors who will meet monthly and take care of smaller things for you. And so we thank the members of our board, which include our president, which right now is Carl Freshley, our vice president, which is now Kirby Bach, and then I'm going to mix up the treasurer and the secretary, the financial secretary. So that's when I mixed them up even by not putting them both on the list. So treasurer, that would be Jim Steffens. Financial secretary would be Jim Stubbs. And then the secretary would be Angel Romai. Our called staff, so Pastor Otto, myself, and Deaconess will sit with the board. And our 4 members at large over property, family discipleship, missions, and then fellowship and church life. That would be Bob Borgelt, and then Megan Snyder, and then Kimberly Baucom, and Don Branson would be that list. So they get together once a month. They have permission from you to make expenditures. Is it up to $5,000? So if something big comes up, they need the voters to do it, but they can handle smaller things in between, so you all don't have to meet all the time. Any of you ever been to a church where the voters' assembly meets monthly? Quarterly? All right, I only saw a couple of hands there, but there are certainly LCMS churches that do that. We have a board of elders. St. Matthew, we have 12 elders on that board. Doug Clark is the current chair of our board of elders as of the start of this year. So thank you all, both on the board and the other board, for those things. And then the LCMS, we also have our pastors who are our spiritual shepherds of the flock in the local place. So Pastor Otto has served here probably for 21 years now. I haven't heard the stat. I know it was 20. We celebrated 20. I don't know what day it was, though, so we're probably 21. If I've really not been paying attention, maybe it's even 22 by now. Anybody know? It was August something, but 2004. So yeah, we're 21 and quickly approaching 22. Our connection to the LCMS, we are in the 13th Circuit of the Missouri District called the Kansas City South Circuit. There's a central, Kansas City Central, and there's a Kansas City North Circuit as well. So on the east side of the state line, we're broke into 3 circuits. On the west side of the state line, Kansas City, Kansas is divided into 2 more circuits. So Kansas City area as a whole has 5 LCMS circuits in it. I serve as circuit visitor. I've had that role for 4 years now. Before me, it was Pastor Reimnitz. He's retired from ministry, and I haven't seen him since he retired. So if you know Pastor Reimnitz, pass on the word that I'd love to see him again. He's disappeared on us, so I was just talking about that with somebody yesterday, actually. And then our district, President Lee Hagan has been our district president now for, I think it's 11 years technically, because they're 3-year terms, but the COVID thing pushed a district convention out, so that became a 4-year term that particular year. And he was reelected last summer for a 3-year term. And as you all know, a month later, he had a stroke, Pastor Otto, as first vice president of the district, has been taking on that work, caring for the district and the congregations, because I think there's 287 churches in the Missouri district, which is third largest, I believe. Texas and Michigan, I think, are the two districts that have more churches than Missouri in a single district without dividing into things. And then synodically again, the LCMS with President Harrison. Questions about structure, either for the LCMS or St. Matthew? Nathan?
Who owns the property?
Church property is owned by the congregation. We had this as a challenge a few years ago when the United Methodist Church started dividing, and they broke up. The church body held the properties. So the local one, a few miles that way, over on View High Road, had to buy their building back when they said, we want to stay faithful to biblical teachings. They had to pay, I think it was $1.5 million to reacquire their church building so they could continue to use it. So yeah, the LCMS, again, is bottom up, so the church owns, the congregation locally owns the building that it uses. Good question. Calvin?
So curious about, I guess, the history behind how that because surely it wasn't that way since the 1500s in the old country.
No, so the German Lutheran church bodies for the longest time, and many of them around the world, are still structured with bishops and so forth. So I would suggest maybe it's a combination both of Bishop Stephan, they thought he betrayed them, which he might have, I don't know. So the combination of that distrust of the bishop with then also, as you pointed out, the culture, the climate that they were in of America. So those two things together may be what have formed our bottom-up instead of top-down polity structure. But it is, I think, probably fairly unique among Lutherans in the world to be designed and structured the way that this is. Any others on structure? All right, this is a definition for membership I wrote. You're welcome to look at the church constitution. There's a definition in there for that. But I thought this was a helpful definition to think about being part of a congregation. What does it mean to be part of a church? A member of a congregation is a baptized child of God. So if you're not baptized, you're not in the congregation yet, right? Simple. Baptized child of God who seeks to follow Jesus in their life as they regularly hear his word and receive his sacraments. Those are good things as Christians, right? This is how he feeds and cares for us. They entrust themselves into the spiritual care of the pastor or pastors of the congregation. And that's not, right, you don't have my name or Pastor Otto's name there because pastors change. Pastors come and go. How many of you have been here at this church longer than I have? How many of you have been here at this church longer than Pastor Otto? I know, he's been here 21 years. Anyway, still many hands up, right? And pastors come and go. The average tenure of a pastor at a congregation in the LCMS, last time I heard that stat, was somewhere in the range of 5 to 7 years. First call, it's closer to 3 to 5, but 5 to 7 years for a pastor staying at one single congregation. You'll know exceptions, right? There, Pastor Reimnitz, I've already mentioned this morning, 38 years, one church, he never had a call. Well, he never took a call anywhere else. I couldn't tell you if he had other calls. But he stayed at Bethlehem and Raymore for 38 years before he retired. They entrust themselves into the spiritual care of the pastor of the congregation and desire to be a part of the body of Christ in that place, being accountable together with their brothers and sisters in Christ as they encourage and build each other up. Those things are just biblical statements of who we are as Christians, right? Bear one another's burdens, Galatians 6. We can't do these things if we're not together, if we don't gather. So the gathering idea is Hebrews 10 as well, that we would gather together, building each other up. This is what we do. So just a biblical, trying to be biblical definition. I probably should have put Bible verses down below there on some of those things, but anyway, any questions on what it means to be a member of a church? Any of you the LCMS used to be a card-carrying church. Did any of you have a card at some point in your life that said you were a member of an LCMS congregation? Within the last couple of generations, that really fizzled out. But even in the 1900s, there were still LCMS churches that did that. And so if you were visiting another LCMS church, you could just pull out your wallet and display your membership card and receive communion there, right? That was just the way the LCMS functioned for a while. But again, no more. None of your hands went up. I'm surprised by that, actually. I would have expected a couple of you. Oh, one, Shirley. Shirley had one. All right.
Somebody we used to go to church with, in probably the late 70s or early 80s, wives now, they visiting at the altar rail, shared awkward. Pastor got right down. Are you a card-carrying member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod? He's like, yes, sir. Okay. And he said his church, they didn't do the card carrying, and it was in that transition phase. Kind of freaked him out a little bit. Yeah.
Fair enough. Shirley, do you still have your card?
I don't know for sure, I'd have to check.
That would be fun to see.
When I was a kid, if we visited another church and went to Sunday school, we got a little card that said that we had attended, attendance card, to bring it back to our congregation.
Yeah. And we still have a couple of people here that when they visit other churches, either they'll let us know they visited another church or bring us a bulletin, or there's 1 or 2 times a year probably I'll receive a letter from another pastor in the synod who says, so-and-so member of your church came to our church today and received the Lord's Supper here. It's really rare, but I get them every now and again. Toby.
I was really close to going on a date in Kansas, and I was actually
Well, if you're ever looking for other congregations as you're out and about and traveling and so forth, just let Pastor Otto or I know. We're happy to help you find them. The internet's a useful tool and can be used in that way, but sometimes, especially good, faithful, small congregations often don't even have websites. So, Joyce.
Well, yeah, I usually jump on LCMS and just look for congregations wherever we are. And we hit Western Nebraska, wasn't it? It was like Oglala. Yeah. And so we were looking, and you got to be aware of time changes because it was like, we could hit this one because the time changed. And then that pastor was filling in for a church on the other side of the time change. So he was like, woo.
Yeah, and then we had a pastor a few weeks back, Pastor Mail told us about one of the times he was out of town with his family on vacation, and they tried to go to church, and the church had changed their worship time but didn't tell anybody else because nobody else ever showed up. So they didn't figure this. They were just going to change it one week, so they missed.
A situation where they changed location because it was a very small congregation.
Yeah.
And they had been meeting one place, and it said Saturday night, and so we went, and no, but there was a sign that said, and we pointed it out to them, you could do something for this.
We had one little church that was like 10 members.
Yeah, we've still got a lot of those tiny churches. I don't know the stat. I think it's like 75% of our churches are under 100 members or something like that. It's a vast majority of our congregations. Nathan. Documentation's kept here. So baptismal information, so forth, if you were to leave the congregation for another one, we would send those records along. But then again, like church closures and things, Concordia Historical Institute has a lot of the older stuff. But yeah, if a church burns down, if their files were only paper, that's been an issue that's been had over the last 20 years. A lot of churches trying to digitize everything from the past, although that's not always safe either. So, Toby?
churches need records of baptism for the members? Do churches need records of baptism? The big thing with it is your benefit. So baptism is for your good, right? Baptism is a gift the Holy Spirit gives. So how many of you were baptized as a child? If you 50 years later after your baptism are just like, was I ever actually baptized? Did I receive that gift? I don't know, right?
Right, we can have certificates that show it. We have witnesses or sponsors or godparents, whatever phrase you want to use, that help for that too. But church records, church documentation can be really helpful in that to give you the assurance to remember, yeah, you were baptized. Today it's kind of fun. We can video record it and share that with the family. And it's just like your kids ask you about this 10 years from now. Just sit down. You can watch their baptism together. That's an entirely new thing. Yeah, it's for the assurance because baptism's a good gift.
So do we not have here a big book that we put all the baptisms, weddings, and deaths in?
A lot of churches do have that big book.
We didn't do it, because I can't keep it up.
I think we do, but I think we have one, but I don't know. I'm not involved in any way, shape, or form with it if we have one. So I'm going to come here first, Katie.
It's also really helpful if you're going back over genealogy and trying to trace back your family, because that's one of the big stumbling blocks that my family has had is the church in Sweden where my grandparents were baptized actually burned down, and we can't trace back the genealogy any further within that family. So having those records are also
Yeah, baptismal records she just mentioned can be used in genealogical research because as you think of a baptismal certificate, it will often say who the parents are. And so if you have those over generations, especially in a small town, right, as they have all those records, you can trace a family numerous generations back sometimes. Judy?
At one time, it's not really much of an issue anymore because most babies have a birth certificate. But in times past, like when my mother was born, the Catholic Church and the Lutheran churches could show baptismal records as proof of age for Social Security.
So at a previous era of the United States, you could use baptismal certificates as proof for things like Social Security. That's certainly no more, but...
We baptize our babies as
Yep. And very quickly.
yes.
So your baptismal date was often very close to your birthday, if not the same in some cases. So one over here. Colin?
Just adding to the genealogy. You can't find a birthday. It wasn't recorded anywhere, but you can find a baptism date.
That's great. I mean, it's your new birth, right? Baptism is the new birth. Be born again by water and the word. So it's the better birthday anyway. But I do tell families that it's the better birthday. If you're going to celebrate one, celebrate the baptism. But it is an excuse to celebrate both. That's especially for the kids, I say that. But, all right. So I had more slides to this, but we're going to have to wrap up. So what do you see when you come to church? We ran out of time that day a couple months ago, and so I had a whole section on what pastors wear, and it's across the board. Different Lutheran churches, as we saw our partnerships, but also LCMS churches, as you go, you will see them wear different things. So what are those things? Maybe I'll tack that onto another one of our classes another day. I also Pastor Otto likes to put this together. He puts out a new one every year or two. The St. Matthew Church Handbook. This goes over ways that you can be involved in the life of faith here at the church, different opportunities, different ways to serve, different groups, all those kinds of things are listed in here. And I updated it. There were a couple of changes because our seniors lunch group that meets once a month changed their time from 11:30 to noon, so I updated that. There was one other thing I tweaked in here too, but I don't remember off the top of my head now. So if you would like one of those new ones, they are going to be right here. You're certainly welcome to it. If there's extras, I'll carry them down to church and put them out on the counter where they often sit on that L-shaped desk right when you come in the doors of the church. So, any other questions this morning? All right. Well, again, thank you for being here. God's peace be with you as you go about the vocations He's given you today.